At the beginning of the story, the protagonist's father told him that the necklace was left by his mother for him, and that he should wear it when encountering a crisis or experiencing a major change in his body. Xiatian, inquiring about his mother, suddenly realized that his father was no longer around. Calling out for his father and finding no response, Xiatian woke up from sleep, finding himself in a hospital bed, bewildered and wondering what was wrong with him. At this moment, a nurse entered and noticed that he was awake. Frightened, Xiatian began to shout, which startled the nurse. She questioned what he was doing, explaining that he had scared her. Xiatian, still confused, explained that he was a little disoriented and had hallucinated. The nurse instructed him to lay down quickly, mentioning that he had suffered severe injuries and that waking up was already a miracle. Feeling disheartened, Xiatian asked what had happened to him. The nurse, realizing that he didn't remember, informed him that he had saved a little girl and almost got himself run over. Xiatian, recalling the incident, inquired about the child's well-being. At that moment, a lady entered the room carrying a bouquet, informing Xiatian that her daughter was fine. Xiatian, surprised to see her, thought that it was happening again. The lady noticed his reaction and asked what was wrong. Xiatian replied that he was fine, though he was experiencing hallucinations as an aftermath. The lady acknowledged that Xiatian had saved her daughter and expressed her gratitude, stating that she would compensate him sufficiently so he wouldn't need to find an excuse to blackmail her. Xiatian responded, questioning if she thought he was lying to her for money. The lady then offered 1 million as compensation, to which Xiatian showed no interest. She sat down on a chair and increased the offer to 2 million, but Xiatian, getting out of bed, said that he did it for himself and didn't need any money from her. The nurse intervened, reminding Xiatian that he couldn't leave the bed since his injury wasn't healed yet. Despite this, Xiatian continued to move towards the exit. The lady, raising her offer to 5 million, asked if that would be enough. Xiatian stopped and told her that he didn't want any money because the child's life couldn't be compared to money. Then, he left the room. As Xiatian exited the room, heading towards the lobby in frustration, he expressed disbelief at the behavior of some parents. Just then, he noticed the little girl he had saved standing in front of him. She recognized him as the big brother who had saved her, and thanked him with a smile. Xiatian assured her that he didn't regret saving her at all. The nurse, observing this interaction from behind, felt pleased with Xiatian, and her smile clearly showed her approval. Xiatian then turned to the nurse, wanting to say something. When she asked what it was, he inquired if he could borrow $100 because he didn't have money to go home. The nurse, puzzled, thought to herself that this person had just rejected 5 million in compensation, so she assumed he was rich and indifferent to money. It turned out he was just a poor student. Introducing himself, Xiatian thanked the nurse and promised to find a chance to repay her. The nurse, Bai Yi, replied that he didn't need to pay her back. As Xiatian prepared to leave, he told her he'd see her later. The nurse, confused by his behavior, thought to herself that he was a very mysterious person. Xiatian arrived home and announced his return. Seeing that no one was home, he thought to himself that it was a good thing. Opening a box, he recalled that his father had once told him that during a major crisis or a significant change in his body, he should wear a certain item. Considering his heavy injuries and the sudden acquisition of X-ray vision, he figured it was the right time to wear it. Addressing his absent father, Xiatian decided that he would wear the necklace that day. As soon as he put the necklace around his neck, it emitted a bright light. After a while, Xiatian realized he had fallen asleep and noticed that the shine was gone. Wondering what had happened, he removed the bandage from his hand and found his wounds healed and his skin shedding. He surmised that these were the effects of the necklace and decided that he needed to take a quick shower, finding the process gross. While undressing, the bathroom door opened, and a beautiful girl in tight clothes emerged. Both Xiatian and the girl were shocked to see each other. Recognizing her, Xiatian referred to her as Cartoon Bear. Hearing a scream, another lady entered the room, asking what was wrong. The girl, calling him a pervert, slapped Xiatian hard across the cheek. The second lady who had entered the room, Xiatian's cousin, reassured her friend by saying not to be afraid, as Xiatian was her cousin and she had already taught him a lesson. She then questioned Xiatian about his whereabouts for the past 2 days, noting that his phone had been off. Xiatian, puzzled, asked about the date. His sister informed him that it was the 16th, prompting Xiatian to realize that he had actually been unconscious for 2 days. His sister expressed her frustration, pointing out that he had been missing for 2 days and immediately offended her friend upon their first meeting. Xiatian defended himself, claiming that the girl was covered tightly and he didn't see anything. The girl, reflecting on his words, thought that since she was indeed covered tightly, how did he know anything? She recalled Xiatian addressing her as Cartoon Bear when he first saw her. Feeling disturbed, she told her friend that Xiatian was a weird kid. Xiatian went out to the garden, reflecting on how much lighter his body felt after being treated by the necklace, making everything seem effortless. Mr. Fan approached him, commenting on his impressive physical fitness and inquiring if he had been a soldier before. Xiatian clarified that he was only 19 years old. Mr. Fan then asked if Xiatian was interested in sparring with him. Xiatian initially declined, citing respect for Mr. Fan as a senior. However, Mr. Fan challenged him, asking if he was afraid of injuring him and urging him to make a move. Recognizing this as an opportunity to spar with a legendary martial arts master, Xiatian accepted the challenge respectfully. Mr. Fan appreciated Xiatian's humility and encouraged him to proceed. Xiatian attacked, but Mr. Fan skillfully caught his hand and threw him aside. Xiatian realized how close he was to getting hurt, but felt relieved that his body had become lighter. Mr. Fan praised his skills and urged him to continue. As they fought again, Xiatian noticed he could predict Mr. Fan's attack paths and thought he might be able to win. Mr. Fan, surprised, wondered how Xiatian had suddenly found his flaws despite never having practiced martial arts, as every punch targeted his weak points. Eventually, Mr. Fan called off the sparring, impressed, and asked for Xiatian's name, introducing himself as Mr. Fan. Mr. Fan, Xiatian introduced himself to Mr. Fan, who then expressed curiosity about how Xiatian had managed to break his Tai Chi technique. Xiatian modestly responded that it was just luck and happened by accident. Mr. Fan recognized Xiatian's talent and invited him to visit the Green Forest Villa if he ever had the opportunity, to which Xiatian expressed his gratitude. Mr. Fan then bade him farewell. Xiatian arrived at college, noting to himself that there were still 12 days left until the college entrance exam and that he needed to make a final effort. Seeing a girl in front of him, he recognized her as Wenjing. Wenjing seemed surprised and concerned, mentioning that she thought something had happened to him since he hadn't shown up for a few days. Xiatian, with a hint of sarcasm, questioned if she thought he had committed suicide because she had dumped him. Wenjing, thinking to herself, reflected that she didn't want to dump him, but felt compelled because of his poverty. At that moment, Xiaokong appeared, bringing Wenjing a French breakfast, to which she thanked him. Xiaokong noticed Xiatian and mocked him, suggesting he thought Xiatian might have been so heartbroken that he had killed himself. Wenjing urged Xiaokong to stop, but Xiaokong continued to belittle Xiatian, calling him a nerd who couldn't even keep his girlfriend, questioning the usefulness of studying well. This made Xiatian visibly angry. At that moment, Fire Pepper intervened, confronting Xiaokong and demanding to know which class he belonged to, questioning his audacity to cause trouble in her class and threatening him. Xiaokong responded, telling Fire Pepper to mind her own business as they usually didn't interfere with each other. Fire Pepper, undeterred, asserted that she was nosy and challenged him to do something about it. Xiatian, addressing Fire Pepper, tried to say something, but she cut him off, telling him there was no need to thank her. Despite her disdain for nerds like him, she said she would protect him because he was in her class. Xiatian then clarified that he wasn't trying to thank her but rather to inform her that she had stepped on his foot. Fire Pepper felt offended and remarked that she was standing up for Xiatian, yet he had the nerve to say that to her. Xiatian retorted, asking her to back off as her saliva was spraying on him. Shocked, Fire Pepper questioned if he thought she wouldn't beat him up. Two boys then offered to deal with Xiatian on her behalf. Just then, the teacher entered the classroom with the other students and announced that it was time for class and they would be doing mock exams. Fire Pepper, turning back, warned Xiatian that someone would deal with him later and started to leave the room. The teacher questioned where she and her companions were going since class was starting. Fire Pepper told her friends that they should return and take the exam, but not to take her last place. Her friends obediently agreed. The teacher handed out the exam PA to all the students. As Xiatian looked at the questions, he realized that he didn't need to calculate the answers as they automatically appeared in his mind. A few minutes later, Xiatian approached the teacher and handed in his paper. The teacher, surprised by how quickly he had finished, asked Xiatian if he had checked his answers and expressed concern that he might have guessed randomly, noting that the upcoming exam held high expectations for him. Xiatian assured the teacher that he had answered the questions seriously and requested permission to proceed with the next subject. Meanwhile, outside on the school grounds, Fire Pepper stood under a tree. Her two friends emerged from the classroom and approached her, informing her that they were there. Fire Pepper, noticing Xiatian, asked her friends why he was faster than all of them. One of her friends speculated that he might have randomly filled in the answers and turned in the paper quickly. As Xiaokong approached Xiatian, one of Fire Pepper's friends asked if they were going to help. Fire Pepper decided they should let Xiatian suffer a little before intervening. Xiaokong taunted Xiatian, mocking him for never having touched Wenya and suggesting it was a pity because it felt so good. Xiatian responded that Wenya was no longer his concern, and that Xiao Kong could do whatever he wanted without informing him. Xiao Kong, asserting that Xiatian was unworthy of competing with him for women and had already lost, declared his hatred for anyone coveting his playthings. He then threatened to leave Xiatian with a lasting impression. In response, Xiatian delivered a powerful punch to Xiao Kong's throat, causing Xiao Kong to scream in pain and shocking Fire Pepper. Xiatian followed up by kicking Xiao Kong, sending him to the ground. A bald student, enraged, called Xiatian a motherfucker and threatened him for daring to hit one of their brothers. Xiatian swiftly punched the bald student in the chest. Nearby students, witnessing the fight, started talking among themselves, noting their surprise that someone dared to hit Shu Xiaokong's people. They recalled that Xiatian was the top student of his class. One of Fire Pepper's friends remarked in amazement, questioning if she was seeing things correctly, as the nerd Xiatian was incredibly good at fighting. The other friend noted that Haizi and his group were known to be ruthless, yet Xiatian had dealt with them swiftly. Fire Pepper, impressed and thoughtful, considered how cool Xiatian was and mused that she had always dreamed of being a heroine. She thought that if she could learn a few tricks from him, her dream could come true. Xiao Kong, frightened and addressing Xiatian, asked what he was trying to do. Xiatian warned him to be careful about diarrhea when he got back. Confused and alarmed, Xiao Kong questioned what Xiatian was planning. Xiatian sternly warned him that he was not someone Xiao Kong could afford to offend, and threatened that if he saw Xiao Kong again in the future, he would not let him go. Fire Pepper called out to Xiatian, asking him to wait for her. Xiatian stopped and asked what she wanted. Grabbing his hand, Fire Pepper requested that he teach her martial arts. Xiatian, surprised, denied knowing any martial arts and questioned why she was yelling, pointing out that she was the one clinging to him. Fire Pepper insisted she wasn't lying, stating she saw him use real martial arts to knock down the others. Xiatian thought to himself that he had just imitated Mr. Fan's moves. Fire Pepper reiterated that she didn't believe him, but Xiatian continued to deny knowing any martial arts. Nearby students, observing the interaction, remarked to each other about how amazing Xiatian was. They noted that he had beaten up Shu Xiaokong's goons and now appeared to be teasing Fire Pepper. Meanwhile, a man reported to Mr. Fan that everything had been checked out. Mr. Fan listened as the man detailed the findings. Xiatian, a 19-year-old male, had his mother disappear right after his birth, and his father died unexpectedly when he was 14. Xiatian was currently studying at Zhanghai High School, where he excelled academically. Half a month ago, he saved the daughter of Zang Ru, chairman of the Zhang family, one of the 4 major families of Zhanghai, and left the hospital without asking for any payment. He was currently living with his cousin and earned money through part-time jobs. Mr. Fan inquired about Xiatian's parents, to which the man responded that he couldn't find any information as it was all encrypted. Xiatian's father had an A-level encryption, and his mother an S-level encryption, meaning their permissions were not sufficient to access the details. Mr. Fan pondered over the encrypted information. Fan asked about the latest movements in Quicksand. The man reported that Quicksand had also noticed Xiatian, but they seemed to be after something specific rather than his life, so they were unlikely to strike at him for the time being. Mr. Fan remarked that Zhanghai City had not been peaceful lately and mentioned his plans to leave. He instructed the others to stay behind to protect Xiao Fang and the others, warning that if anyone dared to touch them, they should be killed. The man expressed concern that the young master was very sensitive to their presence and reminded Mr. Fan that the young master was skilled and had trained their people. Mr. Fan advised protecting the young master from a distance, emphasizing that no one except Quicksand would dare to touch his son in Zhanghai City. He reiterated that Quicksand was the #1 assassin organization in the city. Meanwhile, a boy addressed Lord Hidden Bat, asking when they would strike. Lord Hidden Bat responded that it was not yet time and instructed them to keep an eye on Xiatian. He ordered that as soon as they found the secret scrolls, they could strike. The boy acknowledged the order. Lord Hidden Bat added that they should keep an eye on Xiatian and eliminate anyone else who tried to get to him. On Pedestrian Street, Fire Pepper asked Xiatian when he would teach her martial arts. Xiatian reiterated that he wasn't her master and only knew 2 moves, which he intended to pass on to his future wife and children. Fire Pepper suggested that Xiatian could marry her so that the moves could be passed on to her. Xiatian was shocked by this proposal and pointed out that she didn't have the body or looks he wanted in a wife. Fire Pepper responded that he didn't need to have such high expectations and should just get used to the idea. Xiatian questioned the logic of this, but Fire Pepper insisted, grabbing his arm and suggesting they buy some lottery tickets. Xiatian, puzzled, asked why she would want to buy lottery tickets when her family was rich. Fire Pepper explained that playing was exciting and the money didn't matter. Fire Pepper and Xiatian exited the shop, and she praised him for winning $800 from a lottery ticket, eagerly asking him to teach her some tricks. Xiatian pointed out that she previously wanted to learn martial arts, questioning her sudden interest in lottery tickets. Fire Pepper quickly clarified that she still wanted to learn martial arts. At that moment, Xiatian received a phone call and explained to his cousin that his phone had broken and he had just bought a new one. After agreeing to meet at night, he stopped a car. Fire Pepper, curious, asked where he was going. Xiatian instructed her not to follow, stating that he had important things to do. As he got into the car, Fire Pepper called out after him, "Master!" On Antique Street, Xiatian thought about how it was his cousin's birthday tonight, and how she had asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend. He acknowledged her request, reflecting that it was his fault for forgetting her birthday, and decided to pick out a present for her. Nearby, people noticed Master Shu Dechuan, a renowned treasure hunter, arriving and quickly made way for him, greeting him respectfully. Mr. Shu responded positively, noting the good business. Another person greeted Master Shu, to which he responded warmly. Xiatian observed that there might be valuable items around and felt confident that his keen eyes would help him find a treasure. While moving through the crowd, Xiatian accidentally bumped into Mr. Shu, prompting Mr. Shu's companions to react angrily. Mr. Shu intervened, stopping them. Xiatian then approached a shopkeeper and asked about the price of a piece of jade. The shopkeeper, noting Xiatian's sincerity, offered to sell it to him for 8. Xiatian mentioned that 8 yuan was too expensive as he was just a student and didn't have much money. Mr. Shu observed the situation, thinking that the impolite kid really had little knowledge and planned to intervene when it was time to pay. The shopkeeper worried that Master Shu might expose his trick. Quietly, Xiatian suggested to the shopkeeper that they settle for 200 cents, indicating he knew the jade was fake. The shopkeeper acknowledged Xiatian's sharp eye but insisted the jade wouldn't go for less than 500 cents. Xiatian proposed taking a few more worthless little rocks to seal the deal. The shopkeeper agreed, not wanting to haggle over a few pieces. Mr. Shu commented that while Xiatian was good at bargaining, he had still been duped, pointing out that the jade was only worth about 20 cents and only an inexperienced kid would spend 500 on it. In response, Xiatian dropped the jade, shattering it into pieces. Mr. Shu asked Xiatian if he had already known it was a fake. Xiatian responded, noting that even a child with limited knowledge could see through it. He then thought to himself that he had already obtained what he wanted, a relic of the Buddha's bones that had coalesced when the monk passed away, a treasure he had only heard of in legends but never expected to actually find. Mr. Shu reflected on how his family's assets were now controlled by his nephew Shu Qinghua, and how he had been recruiting talent for years to reclaim those assets. Considering Xiatian as a possible rare talent, Mr. Shu then suggested a competition to Xiatian. When Xiatian inquired about the nature of the competition, 2 bystanders commented on his ignorance, explaining that the renowned Master Shu Dechuan wanted to challenge him in a treasure appraisal competition. Mr. Shu stated that he was a professional treasure appraiser on the street and asked if Xiatian would accept his challenge. Xiatian agreed, proposing that if he lost he would give his life, but if Mr. Shu lost he would help Xiatian buy something he liked. Mr. Shu laughed and remarked that he didn't want Xiatian's life. Instead, if Xiatian lost, he would have to work for Mr. Shu. Xiatian accepted the terms. Onlookers noticed the challenge and commented on the upcoming competition between Xiatian and Master Shu in treasure appraisal. Mr. Shu explained that Xiatian needed to identify which 3 out of 5 items were real antiques to win. As the valuable items were presented, Xiatian confidently stated that there was no need for multiple guesses. He would lose if he identified any incorrectly. Mr. Shu, amused by Xiatian's confidence, agreed. 2 bystanders remarked on Xiatian's arrogance. Xiatian examined the box and declared it genuine. Mr. Shu confirmed, stating that it was a dressing box used by Empress Dowager Cixi in the Qing dynasty. Xiatian then asked if it would be acceptable to damage the box if he found a forgery inside, to which Mr. Shu agreed, saying he could afford to pay for a fake. Xiatian proceeded to throw the vase, surprising the onlookers who exclaimed that the porcelain vase looked real. Xiatian picked up a piece of the broken vase and revealed handwriting inside it. Mr. Shu, impressed and curious, asked how Xiatian knew about the handwriting. Xiatian attributed it to his eyesight, and then identified 2 more items. Mr. Shu conceded the challenge, acknowledging that Xiatian had won and asked him to name his prize. Xiatian pointed out a bracelet, indicating it as his choice. Mr. Shu thought to himself that the bracelet was a trivial object meant to mislead, wondering if he had overlooked something. Xiatian added blood to the bracelet, astonishing the onlookers who recognized it as a blood jade stone. One person offered $1 million for the bracelet, while another raised the offer to 2 million. Xiatian declined, stating it was not for sale, and began to leave. Mr. Shu called after him, asking the young man to stop, and proposed that they become friends, wondering if Xiatian had any regard for him. Xiatian reflected on how his new transcendent eyes had changed everything, and considered that he might begin to uncover the secrets of his parents. Delighted, he agreed to the friendship, thinking about the importance of building his network. Mr. Shu inquired about Xiatian's name, to which Xiatian responded by introducing himself. Shortly after, San approached from his car and confirmed Xiatian's identity. A few moments earlier at Shanghai City Hospital, an old man asked Director Lai about the test results. The doctor explained that they couldn't perform a thorough examination since the patient could barely endure half a minute in the examination room. They did manage to conduct a stool test, which ruled out drug factors. A bodyguard then reported to the old man that they had questioned the young master, who mentioned having a conflict with a student named Xiatian earlier. The student had warned him about the possibility of diarrhea upon returning. The old man concluded that Xiatian must be responsible and asked if someone had been sent to find him. The bodyguard confirmed that San and 2 others had already been dispatched. On the other side, bodyguard San instructed Xiatian to come with him. Xiatian, puzzled, asked who he was. Mr. Shu warned Xiatian to be careful, explaining that San was Xu Xiaohua's personal bodyguard and very powerful, and then inquired how Xiatian had managed to get into trouble with him. San acknowledged Mr. Shu's presence, stating that he would let Xiatian off the hook this time due to Mr. Shu being the boss's uncle, but warned him not to interfere further. Xiatian, reflecting on the situation, realized that San was a relative of Mr. Shu. A person intervened, stating that Xiatian was his friend and could not be harmed while he was present. Xiatian then fought off everyone one by one. Mr. Shu warned not to act recklessly under the protection of Xu Qinghua. San ordered Xiatian to be taken away. Xiatian threw 2 men aside, shocking both San and Mr. Shu. Xiatian challenged them, asking if they still wanted to take him away, and thought it was better to scare San off. Recognizing his unusual strength, San acknowledged Xiatian's fighting ability but remarked on his youth, questioning his relationship with Yan Chufeng. Xiatian retorted, inviting a fight, while thinking he should have learned more from Yan Chufeng. San then decided to be ruthless. Xiatian resolved to fight, determined not to lose his momentum. Just then, masked individuals appeared, announcing they were from the legendary king group of Quicksand, known to San. The masked man warned San to leave, stating they had important business with Xiatian. San declared that he had orders to take Xiatian back, and insisted on doing so, asking the masked figures for a price if they wanted to intervene. The masked person responded that the deal was off, as Xiatian was specifically named by their team leader. San realized that fighting with the assassin organization Quicksand, represented by these masked figures, would only create a significant grudge he could not afford. He then conceded, deciding to back off. Xiatian, puzzled by the situation, wondered why San was so intimidated by these masked individuals and why they came to help him. He asked them who they were. The masked figure explained that they wanted a relic left by Xiatian's father. Xiatian was surprised to hear about his father's relic. The masked figure clarified that there was a scroll among his father's belongings, and gave Xiatian 7 days to find it and hand it over, warning of dire consequences if he failed. Xiatian expressed his confusion, stating he did not recall his father leaving him any scroll, and questioned how he could find it. The masked individual replied that it was not their concern, and warned Xiatian to find it or face dire consequences. After saying this, they began to leave. Xiatian, still unsure, asked them to clarify what exactly they were looking for. Mr. Shu, observing the situation, inquired about what was happening and what they wanted from Xiatian. Xiatian reassured Mr. Shu that it was likely a misunderstanding and that they might have mistaken him for someone else. He then thought to himself that he had 7 days to search for the scroll and planned to visit his old house the next day. For now, he decided to focus on the present events. Elsewhere, people gathered around a girl, each wishing her a happy birthday. Qingshu thanked everyone for their well wishes. Wang Nianlin then stepped forward and asked Miss Qingshu to allow him to present her with a birthday gift. At the birthday party, attendees were talking amongst themselves, noting that Wang Nianlin, one of the 4 sons of the Wang family in Shanghai City, had arrived. They acknowledged that none of them could compete with him, and speculated that he wanted to ask Yi Qingshu out. Qingshu was internally frustrated, cursing the situation as she noticed Wang Nianlin's presence and wondered where Xiatian was. A lady arrived late to the party and presented Qingshu with a gift. Upon opening the box, Qingshu was surprised and remarked that the gift, an antique, was incredibly valuable. Observers noted that no one could surpass this gift. Wang Nianlin, feeling overshadowed but determined, thought to himself that losing attention to a woman didn't matter since women weren't his competition. He just needed to outshine the other men. Kneeling down, Wang Nianlin proposed to Qingshu, asking her to accept his love and be his girlfriend. Qingshu was taken aback and surprised by his proposal. The lady standing there encouraged Qingshu, urging her to accept the proposal and promising Wang Nianlin that she would, calling the moment romantic. Wang Nianlin, thinking to himself, felt confident, believing that the atmosphere was in his favor and that Qingshu's acceptance of the flower would ensure his victory. At that moment, Xiatian arrived, apologizing for his lateness. Qingshu, happy to see him, introduced him to everyone as her boyfriend Xiatian. Wang Nianlin observed Xiatian, noting his cheap, dirty shirt and mud-stained shoes, indicating to himself that Xiatian likely didn't own a car. He then pointed out to Qingshu that her boyfriend seemed to have arrived empty-handed. The lady Qingshu expressed her happiness, stating that having Xiatian there was enough for her. Xiatian responded by asking if they really thought he would come without a gift. He then revealed a bracelet, showing it to everyone. Qingshu, astonished, identified it as blood jade stone, a priceless treasure, and asked where he got it. Looking at Wang Nianlin, Xiatian remarked that it wasn't something one could simply buy from a store. Wang Nianlin questioned if Xiatian was involved in anything illegal and how he could afford such an item. Xiatian asked his cousin not to spoil the mood and indicated that his gift wasn't finished, inviting Qingshu to follow him. He led her to a door and told her to open it and see for herself. Qingshu, puzzled, mentioned that there was just a hall behind the door. As Qingshu entered the room, flowers began to shower down on her. Everyone wished her a happy birthday, calling out greetings to Miss Ye Qingshu. Xiatian explained that he had arranged the setup there because there was no room at home. He then directed everyone's attention outside. On the building, large letters spelled out, "I love you." Qingshu expressed her admiration, saying it was beautiful, and inwardly thought about how wonderful it would be if Xiatian were her real boyfriend. She quickly reminded herself that he was her cousin. Xiatian, reflecting on the scene, thought about how grateful he was to Brother Shu, noting that he hadn't expected him to do so much. Mr. Shu arrived with the car, and everyone got in. Qingshu mentioned that she was really shocked when Xiatian presented the expensive blood jade and wondered if it was all Mr. Shu's help. Mr. Shu clarified that the blood jade indeed belonged to Xiatian, who had acquired it from the antique store using his own skills. Qingshu was surprised but puzzled about when Xiatian had learned to appraise treasures. Xiatian, with a laugh, modestly said he was just lucky. Upon noticing Zang Ru and her daughter in a van, he thought to himself that it was indeed her and then asked Brother Shu to follow the van. Mr. Shu, though unsure of the situation, trusted that there must be something important and decided to follow the van. Qingshu, concerned, asked what was happening. Xiatian instructed that once they caught up with the car, she should go to a safe place, call the police anonymously, and inform them that Zang Ru and her daughter had been kidnapped. Qingshu was shocked by this revelation. They followed the van to a deserted location where a man pushed Zang Ru out. Zang Ru accused the man of being sent by those who wanted to take over her share in the company. The man confirmed her suspicion, telling her to be quiet, as they intended to make a compromising film with her for Brother Bai to use as leverage. Zang Ru's daughter cried out for her mother, and as Zang Ru tried to reach her, a man grabbed her from behind. She demanded that he not touch her daughter and called for help. At that moment, Xiatian arrived and advised the attackers to surrender, warning them that the police would arrive soon. A bald man taunted Xiatian, asking who was looking for death. 3 men attacked Xiatian, but he swiftly defeated them. The bald man, angry, threatened Xiatian, saying he wasn't finished yet. Realizing their mission had failed, he decided to end things and fired a gun at Zang Ru. Xiatian stepped in, taking the bullet in his chest. Zang Ru screamed in horror at the sight. A bald man remarked that Xiatian deserved what he got for trying to be a hero, and then resumed his approach towards Zang Ru. As the bald man moved towards her, Xiatian launched an attack from behind, knocking the bald man to the floor. Xiatian urged Zang Ru to leave the place with him. She insisted on calling an ambulance because Xiatian had been shot, but he refused, explaining that he couldn't go to the hospital. Instead, he suggested they go to his nearby house. Once at Xiatian's house, Zang Ru applied medicine and bandaged his wound. Xiatian thought to himself that his body had somehow changed and feared that if he went to the hospital, he might be treated as a lab rat. Xiatian fell asleep. Zang Ru noticed a light and exclaimed in surprise, feeling the heat emanating from it. When she examined Xiatian's wound, she was shocked to find it had disappeared, thinking it was impossible. Zang Ru's daughter asked about Xiatian's condition, to which Zang Ru reassured her that he was fine and just needed to rest. Upon waking up, Xiatian wondered if he had been dreaming. Realizing that his wound had vanished, he thought it might be because of something unusual. Reflecting on recent events, he acknowledged that his ordinary life had completely changed, with mysterious occurrences like the necklace, encounters with a Tai Chi master, ancient antiques, and even assassination attempts. Meanwhile, masked individuals arrived and expressed their impatience, stating that although 7 days were given, Xiatian hadn't even started looking for the scroll, and they questioned if he really wanted to die. They then gave him just 1 day to find it, saying it was his choice. Xiatian protested, explaining that he didn't know about any scroll and asked how they expected him to find it. The masked individuals interpreted this as him being determined to go against Quicksand. Xiatian, in his thoughts, wondered what to do. He acknowledged that he now had the eyes that could see through everything, but he still couldn't see through their movements. He questioned if he was going to die there that day. The masked individuals attacked Xiatian, who retaliated by taking them down one by one. Observing this, the masked figures realized that Xiatian was using Fan Lao Tai Shi's techniques and noted that it would be problematic if the situation dragged on too long, so they decided to end it quickly. Zang Ru arrived and ordered the attackers to leave. Xiatian, concerned, told her to go back, but Zang Ru refused, insisting she couldn't let anything happen to him after he had saved their lives multiple times. Xiatian, initially feeling animosity, was touched by her courage and felt he couldn't back down either. The masked individuals were baffled by this exchange and criticized them for flirting while facing danger. Just then, Zhan Yuanhong arrived, and the masked figures identified him as the world's #1 swordsman. Zhan Yuanhong swiftly defeated the masked individuals with a single strike. Zhan Yuanhong instructed one of the masked individuals to take the bodies away. He then addressed Xiatian, confirming his identity. Xiatian acknowledged that he was indeed Xiatian, though he was surprised by Zhan Yuanhong's speed, having not seen him move. Zhan Yuanhong commented on how Xiatian resembled his father and shared the same courage. Xiatian, realizing the connection, asked if Zhan Yuanhong had known his father. Zhan Yuanhong responded by advising Xiatian to crush the jewel in the necklace, explaining that although it was added by Xiatian's father, what was inside was his mother's legacy. Despite his reluctance, Xiatian eventually crushed the jewel and discovered that it contained a scroll. Xiatian noted that the scroll was what the others had been seeking and that it was hidden inside the necklace. Zhan Yuanhong explained that Xiatian's father wanted him to keep the scroll safe, which was why he had placed it in the necklace and told Xiatian it was his mother's legacy. Xiatian then inquired about the kind of man his father was. Zhan Yuanhong described him as someone who wished for Xiatian to live a peaceful and ordinary life, adding that he was a great man. Xiatian expressed doubt about being able to lead an ordinary life given his current circumstances. Zhan Yuanhong revealed that he wanted Xiatian to be his apprentice. Surprised, Xiatian greeted Zhan Yuanhong as his master. Zhan Yuanhong reminded Xiatian that there were less than 6 days left before the college entrance examination, which was something his father had wished for him to take. He advised Xiatian to attend school daily and come to him for training afterward. Xiatian agreed enthusiastically. Zang Ru arrived and asked if Xiatian was all right. Xiatian thought to himself that this was great, as it would give him more strength to complement his enhanced vision. The next morning, Fire Pepper approached Xiatian, urging him to wait and asking when he would start teaching her martial arts. Xiatian responded that he needed to learn martial arts from his master himself and asked her not to pester him. Fire Pepper reminded him that he had previously said he would teach his wife and expressed that she was ready. Xiatian firmly stated that it would not happen, clarifying that she was not his type. Fire Pepper inquired about his preferences, to which Xiatian replied that he did not like someone who dressed like a delinquent. Fire Pepper's friends advised her not to provoke him and agreed with Xiatian. Fire Pepper insisted that it was just a matter of clothing and promised to change her attire, asking her friends to come along and help with the change. Xiatian entered the canteen, where Qingshu greeted him and expressed her concern about his well-being, mentioning that he had frightened her the previous day. She noted that Mr. Shu had handled all the follow-up questions and suggested that he should have called her to say thank you. Xiatian responded that he had already spoken with Mr. Shu on the phone. He reflected that while he hadn't thanked Mr. Shu himself. Mr. Shu had thanked him for agreeing to participate in a tournament to resolve a dispute with his nephew. Xiatian thought it was advantageous to let Mr. Shu owe him a favor, considering Mr. Shu's power. A girl, clearly annoyed, complained about Xiatian taking her coke. Xiatian apologized profusely. Qingshu informed Xiatian that, now that everything was settled, she needed him to do something for her. Xiatian noted her use of the word ask with surprise, as it was not something he typically associated with her. Qingshu then corrected herself, asserting that she was giving him an order rather than making a request. Xiatian remarked that this was more like his cousin. Qingshu then instructed him to participate in a basketball game with the arts department that day. At that moment, a girl arrived with a boy and expressed surprise that external help was being brought in. The girl remarked that the arts department was full of weak and pathetic men who couldn't even be convinced to play. Qingshu appeared angry and addressed the girl with frustration. Xiatian then commented on the girl's physical attributes and jokingly suggested she become his wife. The girl, incensed, accused him of being a hooligan and suggested admitting defeat rather than relying on someone like him. Qingshu stood up and reminded the girl of their bet, stating that if she won, the girl would have to call her sister whenever they met in the future. The girl agreed to the terms, adding that if Qingshu lost, she would have to call her sister instead. Meanwhile, Xiatian sipped on his coke and found the bet childish, noting that their ages were not significantly different. Qingshu's friend observed with annoyance that he was drinking from her coke again. Xiatian proposed a bet to the girl, suggesting that if she lost the basketball game, she would have to be his little wife and call him big husband whenever she saw him. The girl, enraged, kicked at Xiatian, who caught her foot. Qingshu then punched Xiatian, demanding to know what he was doing. The girl, still furious, accepted the bet but added that if Xiatian lost, he would have to run around the school naked. She then told her companion to leave with her. Qingshu remarked on Xiatian's audacity, pointing out that he wanted her sworn enemy to be his wife. Xiatian clarified that he meant little wife and thought to himself that he never dared to dodge his cousin's punches. On the day of the competition, the girl announced that she would only send one first-tier player while the rest would be second-tier, to ensure she wasn't accused of bullying. Xiatian remarked to Qingshu that they didn't even have the minimum required number of players. Qingshu told him to wait a little longer, and soon a group of boys arrived, saying they were there to help. Qingshu introduced them as her other outside help, Tiger Peng and Yan Shu. Xiatian noted that now they had the necessary numbers. People standing outside were cheering for the basketball team and shouting encouragement for Fang Li. Qingshu, hearing the name, inquired about Fang Li. Fang Li, basking in the attention, declared that he received flowers and applause everywhere he went and expressed his desire to live his life in peace and quiet. Qingshu, thinking to herself, realized with surprise that Fang Li was their starter and recognized him as a popular basketball player. The girl, irritated, warned Fang Li to stop acting narcissistic or she would make him drink her special concoction. Fang Li, alarmed, quickly agreed to follow her instructions. Xiatian, addressing his teammate, lamented that they didn't even have any supporters cheering for them. A girl volunteered to cheer from the sidelines, but Xiatian, thinking to himself, hoped his eyes wouldn't automatically activate. A boy with purple hair instructed his teammates to simply take the ball from their opponents and play any position they wanted. Xiatian, still pondering, hoped his teammates would dominate the game quickly so he wouldn't have to reveal his strength on the basketball court yet. Fang Li made a successful basket, displaying his skill. Xiatian, contemplating the game, realized it wouldn't be easy. A member of Qingshu's team dribbled the ball, uncertain about whom to pass it to, as Tiger Pan blocked his way. He noticed Xiatian, but before he could pass, Fang Li intercepted and took the ball. Xiatian, in his thoughts, expressed frustration at the lack of passing. The opposing team had scored 4 points, while Qingshu's team had none. At halftime, Qingshu's team discussed their performance. Qingshu expressed frustration, questioning how professionals could do anything with amateur teammates. Another player pointed out that they hadn't been given the ball to help. A third player reminded everyone that they were informed about the situation before the game and criticized the name-calling now that they were losing. Qingshu, feeling frustrated, declared he wouldn't play anymore and that they could play however they liked, as there was no way to match the current score regardless of their efforts. Qingshu, concerned, wondered aloud what they should do if Qingshu and the other two quit, as they wouldn't have enough players. Qingshu, in his thoughts, considered that if the two beautiful women had begged him, he might have reconsidered. Xiatian then called out to the arts boys, asking for 2 more students to join. He boldly stated that he would show everyone how to play basketball and demonstrate the difference in their skills. Despite Kyosu's skepticism, Kyosu responded dismissively, claiming Xiatian was an amateur and sarcastically stating he would bark like a dog if Xiatian could score that much. At the start of the second half, a blonde-haired boy commented to Kyosu that basketball was a real man's sport and that Xiatian thought he could win by teaming up with a bunch of sissies. Kyosu, still skeptical, remarked that he was eager to see what Xiatian could possibly do. The girl instructed Fang Li to take the scores up to triple digits, and Fang Li, confident, noted that with their opponents fighting among themselves, they wouldn't even get the ball. As Xiatian took the ball in his hands and moved towards the basket, 2 onlookers conversed in amazement, questioning if he was really going to throw the ball from there. One of them, puzzled, wondered what Xiatian was doing, jumping near his own basket. Xiatian threw the ball towards the basket, and it went in perfectly. Observing this, people began talking among themselves, expressing disbelief at the kind of shot they had just witnessed, noting how the ball had crossed the entire pitch. They speculated if Xiatian might be a basketball genius. Xiatian then declared that he was just getting started. Qingshu and her friend, both surprised, exclaimed about the craziness of the situation and wondered how it had happened. Next, Xiatian took the ball from Fang Li and moved towards the basket, making a jump and successfully dunking the ball while holding onto the basket as he came down. The referee then announced that the game was over. The scoreboard showed 40 points for the girls' team and 111 points for Qingshu's team. The girls cheered for Xiatian, admiring his handsomeness and incredible performance. Kyosu expressed frustration, calling Xiatian a lucky bastard. His companion suggested ignoring Xiatian and leaving. Xiatian taunted Kyosu, reminding him of his promise to bark like a dog. Kyosu retorted, claiming Xiatian just got lucky and proposed another physical training competition, insisting he'd bark if Xiatian could win again. Xiatian confidently accepted, saying he wasn't afraid and could take on Kyosu any time. A girl observing thought to herself about Xiatian's talent in basketball, contemplating the strength he could bring to their team in the future, though with some reservations. Xiatian then reminded her of their bet, where she would have to call him Big Husband every time she saw him if she lost. The girl struggled with the idea but eventually shouted Big Husband before running off. Qingsu questioned why she shouted like that, to which Xiatian commented that it indeed sounded like she was calling him husband. The next day, Xiatian reflected on how the regular things he used to do were no longer as important. The new focus was clear to him. Seeing Jian Yuanhong, he acknowledged his master's presence. Jian Yuanhong explained that Xiatian's father never mentioned martial arts because he didn't want Xiatian to follow in his footsteps. However, since Xiatian had stepped into that world, Jian Yuanhong was committed to keeping his promise to Xiatian's father. He would teach Xiatian the Wandering Cloud Immortal Step and the One Finger of God starting from that day. Xiatian was surprised and thought about how he had only seen such kung fu techniques in TV dramas, wondering if they were truly real. Jian Yuanhong confirmed that these techniques were the ones for which Xiatian's father was famous back in the day. Xiatian wondered if his father must have been a great master as well. He thought about trying to find out more about his father from Jian Yuanhong. Jian Yuanhong mentioned that he had not practiced the 2 kung fu techniques himself, so he would only be teaching Xiatian the practice methods and some internal kung fu techniques. Xiatian realized that Jian Yuanhong had avoided the subject and thought he would need to find another opportunity to get more information from him. Jian Yuanhong explained that the Wandering Cloud Immortal Step was a martial technique from the Book of Yin, and the One Finger of God focused mainly on single-point attacks on the enemy's acupuncture points. Xiatian recalled that his father had taught him various things, including the Book of Martial Techniques and the acupuncture points on the human body. At the time, Xiatian thought it was just a hobby of his father's, but he now understood that it was the foundation laid for him from the beginning. Jian Yuanhong remarked on Xiatian's exceptional talent, expressing confidence that he would be able to carry on his father's martial arts legacy. Meanwhile, a man approached a beautiful lady, suggesting she have a drink with them, with another man encouraging her to come along. Qingshu, feeling harassed, told them to let go of her, and then called out to Yanshu for help. Yanshu, in response, proposed that she promise to be his girlfriend in exchange for his assistance. Qingshu questioned how he could take advantage of someone in such a vulnerable situation. A boy intervened, demanding to know what Yanshu was doing and telling him to let go of Qingshu. Another girl asked what was wrong. The man who had initially harassed Qingshu warned them to wait. Yanshu suggested that if the boy went to get help, Qingshu couldn't avoid the trouble. He pointed out that the sports department was right next door, and reiterated his offer to call for assistance if she agreed to be his girlfriend. Qingshu defiant, told him he wouldn't get away with this. Yunshu suggested setting aside the current issue and bringing up the challenge they had discussed previously. Just then, a bald man approached, asking Yunshu if he was with her. Yunshu quickly denied knowing her, much to Qingshu's dismay. The bald man then told Qingshu to come and have a drink with him. Some boys standing nearby intervened, telling the bald man that he couldn't harass girls and demanding to know what he was trying to do. The bald man threatened them, saying they should step aside or risk having their necks snapped. Qingshu, feeling the situation escalating, made a phone call thinking they were in trouble. Meanwhile, Xiatian was working out when he received Qingshu's call. He answered and, hearing the situation, assured her that he would be right there. Xiatian thought to himself that it was time to put into practice what his master had taught him, starting with the cloud steps. The bald man, addressing one of the boys, questioned what he was looking at. Another man responded that it was none of his business. The bald man then attacked all the boys, telling them to take a look at themselves. Turning to Qingshu, he menacingly remarked on the room's soundproofing, saying that even if she screamed her lungs out, no one would hear her, and no one would see her either. At that moment, Xiatian arrived and added that no one would see him either. The bald man, confused, asked his companion where Xiatian had come from. The companion admitted that he hadn't seen Xiatian arrive. Xiatian decided to try using the Godfinger technique. The bald man ordered his men to beat Xiatian to a pulp. Using the Godfinger technique, Xiatian fought off everyone. Qingshu, astonished, called out Xiatian's name. The bald man, bewildered, demanded to know who Xiatian really was. Xiatian replied by referencing the soundproofing in the room, and after kicking the bald man, told him that even if he screamed his lungs out, no one would come. Xiatian then locked the door from inside, dealt with the bald man, and finally opened the door to step out, declaring that it was over. Outside, two girls discussed what had happened. One asked about the situation, while the other mentioned that she had heard it was a gang fight. When the police arrived, Qingshu protested, questioning why they were taking Xiatian away, noting that he had saved them. The police explained that they were taking him back to assist with the investigation and asked her not to interfere with official business. Xiatian reassured Qingshu that, given the situation, it could be considered self-defense, so he should be fine. Despite his reassurance, Qingshu was still concerned. The bald man, frustrated, demanded the best lawyer and instructed someone to call Mr. Liu, insisting that this situation couldn't end like this. As Qingshu thought about the situation and the connections the bald man might have, she received a phone call. On the call, she informed her mother about Xiatian's trouble. Mrs. Yi responded that she already knew and would handle the rest, reassuring Qingshu not to worry. Mrs. Yi made a phone call and requested Mr. Xue to save someone. Mr. Xu responded that he could not get involved unless it was a major case. Mrs. Yi clarified that the person she wanted him to help was Ying's son. Surprised, Mr. Xu agreed to resolve the matter promptly. Meanwhile, a man sitting at the table in front of Mrs. Yi inquired if something was wrong. Mrs. Yi assured him that there was nothing wrong and suggested continuing their discussion about Bing Bing. At the police station, Xiatian reflected on the situation, finding it odd that although he was reported for assault, a single phone call had led to his release. Xiatian answered the phone and heard Auntie's voice on the other end, complimenting him on his ability to handle a group fight and asking if he had met Yin Ni. It was noted that Yin Ni would now be referred to as his master instead of Jian Yuan Hong. Recognizing Auntie's voice, Xiatian confirmed that she was the one who had helped him and inquired if she knew about Yin Ni being his new master. Auntie responded affirmatively and asked him to come over the next day, as she had something important to tell him. After ending the call, Xiatian wondered what Auntie wanted to discuss and decided to have dinner at the place he was. A girl in a red dress addressed Xiatian, complimenting him and asking if they could share a table. Xiatian responded, expressing it as an honor to dine with two beautiful ladies. Bing then asked him to stop with the indirect flattery and simply answer the question. The girl in the red dress reassured Bing that Xiatian meant well. Xiatian then remarked that Bing seemed unwell. Bing retorted, calling him a pervert and threatening to have him arrested. Xiatian clarified that he wasn't being offensive but was genuinely concerned about her health, pointing out her symptoms and suggesting that she might not live past 30 if things didn't improve. Bing asked Xiatian how he knew about her condition, to which he responded that she wouldn't live past 27. Bing questioned if that was next year. The girl in the red dress advised Bing not to believe Xiatian's claims. Bing then decided to leave, saying she wouldn't eat there anymore. The girl in the red dress asked if there was a cure for Bing's illness. Xiatian said that mentioning a treatment might provoke an aggressive response from Bing. The girl pressed for the treatment details, and Xiatian suggested marriage. She responded with amusement and provided her contact number, asking Xiatian to call her later. She then went to follow Bing, leaving Xiatian to ponder the situation. Remarking on the boldness of the offer without considering the cost, Xiatian thought to himself that he had overslept and apologized to Auntie for being late. Mrs. Yi then asked if Xiatian and Bing knew each other, to which Bing replied that she could not possibly know someone like Xiatian. Bing's mother expressed disapproval of Bing's attitude, while Mrs. Yi questioned Xiatian about what he had done to the young girl. Xiatian insisted he hadn't done anything. Mrs. Yi then introduced Xiatian as the fiancé she had arranged for Bing, which shocked both Bing and Xiatian. Bing expressed her disbelief, stating that Xiatian was not at all what Mrs. Yi had described. Mrs. Yi clarified that the arrangement was not for an actual marriage but rather to support her father through a difficult time. Xiatian thought that Auntie was quite the storyteller but admitted he didn't dare acknowledge it. Bing's parents expressed their thanks for the arrangement. Xiatian then asked Mrs. Yi if he was supposed to pretend to be Bing's fiancé. Mrs. Yi explained that she was using Xiatian as a shield to help Mayor Lin's daughter, who had become entangled with the Yuan family. Xiatian questioned whether Mrs. Yi truly trusted him to handle such a significant situation, and whether she was willing to let him confront a powerful family. Mrs. Yi replied that she believed in Xiatian because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Xiatian noted that despite this, he still had not been informed about his own parents or what kind of people they were. Mrs. Yi informed Xiatian that as a reward for his help, she would give him some information. His mother was still alive. Xiatian was surprised and immediately inquired about his mother's current whereabouts. Mrs. Yi suggested it was better if he didn't know those details and asked him to take care of Qing'esu if she disappeared as well. Xiatian was puzzled by this but felt compelled to respect her wishes. The next day, Xiatian reflected that although he had refrained from asking further questions due to Mrs. Yi's reasons, she had unexpectedly used the situation to assign him a task he couldn't refuse. He recalled Mrs. Yi's request and responded affirmatively when asked if he could do her a favor. At that moment, a girl's voice could be heard shouting for help, indicating a robbery. A boy on a bike was fleeing with her purse. Xiatian, having arrived just in time, decided it was an opportunity to release his frustration and went after the thief. As the boy on the bike boasted about his speed, Xiatian quickly caught up and kicked him off the bike. He then picked up the purse and remarked that the thief got what he deserved. Suddenly, Bing attacked Xiatian, but he managed to grab her leg. When he realized it was Bing, he was surprised and asked why she was there. Bing, annoyed, insisted that her name was Lin Bingbing and not to act so familiar. She showed her ID card, identified herself as a police officer, and accused Xiatian of robbery, demanding that he come with her. Xiatian, confused, tried to respond, but the girl who had been robbed rushed over to clarify that Xiatian had not stolen her bag. She explained that he had helped retrieve it. Bing, feeling a bit confused, addressed the situation. Xiatian pointed out that the bag snatcher was still nearby and handed the bag back to the girl. She thanked him and offered him money, but Xiatian reminded her that he had borrowed money from her before and had intended to repay it sooner. The girl then recognized him from their previous encounter and was surprised that he was the same person who had refused 5 million. Xiatian confirmed his identity and, in gratitude for his help, the girl invited him to a meal. Xiatian declined the offer, stating he had other plans for the day. Bing then addressed the bike thief, saying she needed to take his statement. She expressed her frustration at how Xiatian had managed to run so fast. Later, Bing apologized to Mrs. Yi for her tardiness, explaining that she had encountered a case and had just escorted a robber to the police station. When she saw Xiatian again, she was exasperated and questioned why he kept appearing in such situations. Xiatian responded by inquiring about her well-being.